So 40A is actually improved up to 6mm, but 40B is actually improved 25 caliber and up. So there's a reason why they include this little chart, because even I have forgotten. But these are all bump gauges. Now, go ahead.
20B bump gauges for the 338.
20B. Yes, and that's this one right here. So I don't get these mixed up, I'm going to reach over here and put these all away right now. All right, now this, I got to take this off of here. So this is a body, that's all it is, and same deal. You get it, it's available from Sinclair Brownells. Take this is very similar to the cartridge, to the bullet comparator, same type of body, right? So that goes in there. Put this back onto this body. All right, and then put it on the blade of your caliper. I like to see the same number when I put those on the blade. A lot of guys then will go ahead and zero it out. I don't. So that's another reason why. It's just some arbitrary number. All it means is, all it is a scale to judge something against something else. All right, now let's measure this. Let's see what we got. And this, when you do this, you have to take precise measurements. All right. Because we are dealing with very, very small increments here. All right, I'm going to call that 3.294. Try to remember this stuff. 3.294. And I hope right now for the camera that this is shorter. And you see, it's so, maybe 3.2935. And I have to stress this as strenuously as possible. When you're bumping shoulders, half a thou can be huge. In other words, a shell that'll easily go in the gun and the bolt will just drop. And a shell that goes in the gun, a fired shell that goes in the gun, a fired casing that goes in the gun, and the bolt doesn't want to hardly close, the difference between them two can be half a thou. That's it. And one that you literally would have to beat it shut can be 1 thou. So you're working with very, very small measurements here. And that's one of the reasons why I don't use my bump gauges anymore. Remember, again, reloading is a progression. The more experience you have, in a way, I almost didn't want to say that. I was about to say the less measuring tools you'll have, because you'll be doing everything by feel. In other words, never forget that the gun is the ultimate gauge. The gun, putting the brass into the gun and how it feels in the gun is more important than any of the numbers you get out here. But when you're first learning to do it, the difference between bumping the shoulder half a thou or 1 thou or 1.5 thou is huge, and you need to see it. In other words, you actually see a number. In other words, you have something. Rather than doing it completely by feel, you're measuring it. But, again, especially just with a set of calipers, measuring down to half a thou is pretty darn hard. Okay, it just is. Again, but our number, our pre-bump number is 3.294. All right, now, remember, this goes in there until it hits on the actual shoulder, right? All right, so take the normal shell holder off. This is reduced shell holder that I include with the gun. Put the reduced shell holder on. Put the die in the press, and watch what I'm going to do. This is our brass that has resistance on closing. Put it on the shell holder, raise the ram to the top. Take the die and just screw it down. Okay, now I'm starting to get resistance right there, right? So obviously the die has come down, the die itself has come down to where it is now sitting on the shoulder of that piece of brass. Now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn this hard, right? Like, I've taken all the slop, whatever slop there was in this die, I've now removed, right? Now, and I'm doing this for the camera. I'm going to measure this again. And believe it or not, just with hand pressure, I might have already almost moved that, but I didn't. So we are now at 3.294, right? So watch what I'm going to do. Run it back up to the top, and I'm showing you, it's as tight as I can get it. By hand, I could not tighten that anymore. Now, and again, I'm doing this for the camera. I already have a mark on this die over here, but I'm going to put another one on it so that the camera can see it out to the front. And really, all this is a reference point. That's all it is, right? All right, here we go. So all I'm going to do is, no lock ring, by the way. We're not messing with that. I'm going to raise the handle, lower the ram. I'm going to turn the die a very small amount, and I'm going to push this back up. Now watch this with my right hand. Right there is resistance. Right there, it cams over. Okay? Don't bump your die. I'm going to reach over here, and I'm going to remeasure this. Okay? And we are at
3.2935. Half a thou.
3.2935. That is all it took. And it actually, look, if I put, again, this is imprecise because I'm using calipers, but I actually went 3.293. Now, remember that this piece of brass, please get your gun. This piece of brass was the one that chambered with resistance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No resistance. I want to make sure that everybody saw what we did, and everybody, go ahead and get over here. I want to make sure that people understand what we just did. So we had a piece of brass with resistance. We bumped the shoulder only, and we only moved that shoulder less than 1 thou. 1 thou of an inch. Piece of paper is 3 inches thick. Never forget that. I say that 1,000 times. 3 inches thick, a piece of paper. Yes.
3 thou.
3 thou. Sorry. Sorry. Again, my brain's scattered. 3 thou thick. All we did was bump that shoulder back less than 1 thou of an inch. 1 thou. The bolt just closes. All right. Now, because I know I'm going to forget this, so I want to just stay where you're at. Everybody stay where you're at. Take this gun so that I don't get distracted. Especially with guys who are just starting out bumping shoulders. It is very normal for them to want to push the shoulder further than it needs to go. So never forget that what we're not reloading. We're trying to solve a problem. You have to think about it in that way. The brass didn't want to go in uniformly back into the gun, so the problem is, how do we get it to go back in uniformly without doing any damage to the case? And all we did was bump the shoulder less than 1 thou. Now it chambers the same as they chamber, so theoretically it'll shoot in the exact same group. But with novice reloaders, guys, especially guys who are just starting to do this, their inclination is to want to push the shoulder more. Leave it. To push the shoulder more than it needs to. Now you got to think about what we're doing here. We are putting pressure down on the shoulder of this case, and we pushed it back just a super small amount, right? Just barely push that down. It goes back in. Now, if you over adjust your die and push it more, what do you think is going to happen?
We'll press the case too.
It's going to push it down, but what's going to happen? What's going to be the result of pushing
your overall case?
Exactly. Your guys can't see this. It expands radially, right? As soon as it expands radially, you've now created a secondary problem that you actually have nothing to solve with. because it's swelled this way now, right? So if say you had a full length sizer die, because a full length mostly works on radial, right? And you squeeze it down in there to fix what you just did, the shoulder comes back forward and it grows in overall length. Remember what we said, anything you do to brass causes it to grow, right? Well, what we want is we want uniform case length also. Remember that? All right. So you have to be very careful that you don't make your problem worse. I've ran into this many times with many customers. They'll call me up and say, well, initially it didn't want to go in the gun. It had some resistance. So I tried bumping shoulders, and now it goes in with more resistance than it did before. And what they've done is they've created their own problem, and really you can ruin your brass that way, because if it swells radially too much, the only option you're left with is some level of full-length sizer die and or the body die. Remember, this is a body die, and the deal is this goes the whole way in there. The only spot it's not sizing on this is the base, and the base would not be what swells. If you bump that shoulder too much, it'll swell somewhere in here. All right, so really, again, I go too deep is the problem. If you had, and of course the guts are in it, let's just say this was your only alternative. So you bumped the shoulder too far, you swelled the case radially, but you can't, remember, you can't run that in there because it'll touch the neck.
Mm-hmm.
It'll push the neck down. So you have no options now. What you have is the option of a custom made die. And again, there's no guarantee that your custom made die is being made right. Unless it's being made by Neil Jones, then it'll be right. Unless it's being made by me. Alright. So we bumped the shoulder and we got it to win. Now these are all the same. Now what I'm about to do here, in a way, is horrible, because everything in reloading is uniformity, excuse me, uniformity, uniformity, uniformity. But I can't teach this unless I show it to you. All right? Now, where's our bullet? Here's our bullet. Remember, 338, right? 338, it won't go in there. But because we measured it, we know that it's running right at about 336, 336 and a half. Even, let's just call it 337. That's only 1 thou neck tension. All right. So if this was going to shoot paper and paper only, and you could be very gentle on your ammo, I would load them right now. I would put a primer in it, I would put powder in it, and I would seat those bullets.
Okay, question.
Okay.
I got that paperwork out in the truck. So when we trimmed them,
Go ahead, swing the camera around.
When we trimmed all that and we did all that stuff to begin with, does that relationship have anything to do with that bullet now? Do you want it the same as what you had before?
Wait, I'm not understanding the question. Which is the same?
Okay, so like when we trimmed her necks, you used the expander mandrel.
Trimmed the necks, are you talking about we turned the necks, or are you talking about trimmed it?
Well, like you using your expander mandrel and all that, does that have any relationship now with what we did the first time?
Well, yes, because... Yeah, okay, I think I get where he's going with this. Okay.
You may grab that paper.
No, I don't need it. I don't need it. Watch. This is the other thing, too. A lot of times, the answer to what you're looking for is right in front of you. So here's what he's saying. We turned the necks on this brass, right? And it looks like we turned the necks on this brass to 13.5. Okay? So there's your answer right there. So what he's saying, I believe, is if we had turned deeper into the neck, would that affect the relationship of how much neck tension we have? And the answer is absolutely yes. Because if we would have turned the necks more, they would have been thinner. They would have expanded larger when it went off in the gun, right? So if it expands to a greater degree, then as a normal factory gun, the bullet would drop right through, right? Mm-hmm. Then you're forced. It's a really good question, actually. You didn't phrase it well, but it's a really good question. Because then you're forced to resize the neck. You don't get a choice.
Yeah.
Right? All right. But here's the other thing about that. So right now, we're going to assume that we're talking about 1 thou neck tension, the way it is now, right? If we seated a bullet in it. And we turned these to 13.5. If we'd have turned these to 14, we would have more neck tension, because the brass itself would be thicker and it wouldn't have been able to expand as much then, right? So the neck tension then would increase. But don't forget that you can never go over your loaded neck diameter is 3/68, the biggest you can take. You understand that? So you always, all right, again, slow down. For safety reasons, you must know what your actual neck diameter is in the gun. It's 3/68. So we've already established that you should never have a loaded round that measures over 3/67. And that's running it pretty close. All right? That is priority. This is first and most important. All right. This, whether the bullet will drop through or whether you have neck tension, is of secondary importance. But what you ask is exactly right. If you alter how thick your brass is when you're turning necks, you will also alter how much neck tension is on the bullet as, this is very important, as the cartridge comes out of the gun. Because as soon as you start using bushings, you can alter it to whatever you want. You can't make it bigger, but you can make it smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yes. So if you wanted more neck tension, you would have thicker necks. If you wanted less neck tension, you would have thinner necks. And that's assuming that you don't want to use bushings. Okay? You don't want to use bushings. All right, now, this is still the one that used to chamber hard, I think. I'm pretty sure it is.
It is.
So I want to show you something now, because again, you got to do this in order. Well, wait a second. Wait 1 second. All right, so this is the easiest way to figure out what neck bushing. Again, these go in order, incrementally smaller. So that slips on. Obviously, it will not work. It wouldn't do anything. All right, and it's so hard for me to see this. I already said this. That's a 3/68. Once I know the beginning one, that's 3/68. This is 3/67. Obviously, that would do nothing. Okay? 3/66, I could push it on. If I could push